The triage note read 4 words typed in capital letters: "Don't send me home." Eleanor Grimshaw had been an emergency room nurse for 15 years. She'd seen gunshot wounds and overdoses and every variation of human tragedy that arrived through sliding doors at 3 in the morning. She'd learned to read between the lines of what people said and what their bodies revealed. Bruises told stories. Burns left evidence. Fear had a smell. But this note stopped her cold, because it wasn't typed in capitals for drama or emphasis. It was typed that way because the charge nurse who'd done intake had to lean in close to hear an elderly man whisper it like a final command, like a secret, like something that couldn't be said out loud in case the wrong person heard. The man's name was Theodore Henry Wallace, 78 years old, 5 feet 10 inches tall, 118 pounds. That last number made Eleanor's jaw tighten. A man that height should weigh 165 pounds, minimum. Theodore Wallace had lost 47 pounds from somewhere. And looking at him now lying on the gurney in Bay 4 of St. Vincent Hospital's emergency department, Eleanor could see exactly where those pounds had gone. Gone. Just gone. Starved away. It was 11:52 p.m. on Friday, December 20th, 2024. Outside, the temperature had dropped to 16 degrees below zero. The kind of cold that made metal burn when you touched it. The kind of cold that killed people who stayed outside too long. Inside Bay 4, something colder was revealing itself. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead with that particular frequency that lived in every hospital in America. Down the hall, a heart monitor beeped its steady rhythm. Someone laughed at the nurse's station. Normal sounds, safe sounds, the sounds of a place where people came to be helped. But Theodore Wallace hadn't come here for help. He'd come here to escape. Eleanor pulled on fresh gloves and stepped through the curtain into Bay 4. The man on the gurney looked impossibly small against the white sheets. His hospital gown hung loose on a frame that had once been solid. Military-bearing, Eleanor thought. You could still see it in the way he held his shoulders despite the pain. Despite everything. His forearms were mapped with bruises. Purple, yellow, green. Different stages of healing. A timeline written on skin. And there on his left forearm, 3 circular marks that Eleanor recognized immediately. Cigarette burns. Her pulse started hammering. The man's eyes were closed. His breathing was shallow. An IV line ran into his left arm, delivering fluids his body desperately needed. Around his neck, hanging against the thin skin of his throat, were military dog tags. Old ones. The metal had been worn smooth by decades of wear. Eleanor checked the chart. The grandson, who'd brought him in, had given a statement to the intake nurse. Said Theodore had fallen down the stairs around 10:30 p.m., lost his balance, slipped on the top step, tumbled all the way down, hit his head, got banged up pretty good but seemed okay. Just wanted to get him checked out to be safe. It was a good story. It was also a lie. Because people who fall downstairs don't have bruises in different stages of healing, don't have cigarette burns, don't weigh 47 pounds less than they should, and they don't whisper, "Don't send me home," when someone asks them basic intake questions. Eleanor moved to the bedside, kept her voice low and gentle. "Mr. Wallace, I'm Eleanor. I'm going to be your nurse tonight. Can you hear me?" The man's eyes opened, slowly, like it took effort. They were pale blue, the kind of eyes that had seen things. Combat eyes, Marine Corps eyes, Eleanor would learn later. Eyes that had earned a Purple Heart for taking shrapnel while saving his unit during the Gulf War. Right now, those eyes were filled with something Eleanor had seen before but never got used to. Fear. "Yes, ma'am," Theodore whispered. His voice was rough, damaged, like speaking hurt. "I need to examine you. Check your injuries. Is that okay?" A slight nod. Eleanor began her assessment. Vital signs first. Blood pressure 180/110, dangerously high, heart rate 96, elevated, respiratory rate 22, shallow breathing. She moved to his arms, palpated the bruises gently. Theodore flinched when she touched the old ones. The ones that were already yellowing, the ones that were weeks old. "How did you get these bruises, Mr. Wallace?" He glanced toward the curtained entrance to the bay. His grandson Marcus had stepped out 3 minutes ago. Needed to move the car, he'd said. Really to smoke, Eleanor suspected. She'd seen him check his phone. Seen the way he'd answered every question she'd asked Theodore before the old man could speak. Seen how Theodore flinched when Marcus moved too quickly. She'd seen enough, Sir Eleanor said quietly. Your grandson isn't here right now. It's just you and me. How did you get hurt? Theodore's hand moved to his dog tags, a gesture Eleanor would see him repeat throughout the night, touching the metal, feeling the weight, remembering who he used to be. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. My grandson, Marcus. He pushed me. Eleanor stopped documenting, gave him her full attention. Why I asked for dinner. Theodore's eyes were wet now. I hadn't eaten since morning toast. He got angry, said I was ungrateful, that he was sacrificing everything to take care of me, and I should be thankful for what I got. How long has he been hurting you? Few months. Started with yelling, then withholding food if I complained, then this. He gestured weakly at the bruises mapping his arms. The cigarette burns, the visible evidence of systematic cruelty. Eleanor positioned herself between the bed and the curtain. Not consciously, it was instinct. 15 years of nursing had taught her to recognize danger. And right now, danger was a 37-year-old man who'd brought his grandfather to the emergency room with a cover story and a smile and hands that had left marks. Mr. Wallace, Theodore, are you afraid to go home with him? Theodore's eyes, those Marine Corps eyes that had seen combat and earned medals for valor, filled with tears. Yes, ma'am, his voice cracked. But I have nowhere else to go. And then the story came out, not all at once, in pieces, in the halting voice of a man who'd been silent for too long, a man who'd learned that speaking up brought punishment, that asking for help meant being ignored, that the systems designed to protect him had failed so completely that he'd stopped trying. Theodore told Eleanor about Margaret, his wife. 52 years of marriage. She died 9 months ago, May of 2024. Heart attack, quick. 1 minute she was gardening, the next she was gone. Theodore had held her hand in the hospital and tried to be strong even though his world was ending. Margaret had been everything. His caregiver after the Gulf War injuries left him with mobility issues. His companion, his reason for getting up in the morning. She'd helped him with the daily tasks that pride made difficult to accept. Getting dressed, preparing meals, managing medications. Without Margaret, Theodore couldn't live alone. He had 2 children. His daughter Evelyn lived in California. His son Robert had died in a car accident 15 years ago. Robert's son Marcus had offered to take Theodore in. To honor Dad's memory, he'd said, family takes care of family. It had seemed like kindness. It was a trap. First month was okay, Theodore told Eleanor. His words came faster now. 9 months of silence breaking like a dam. Marcus seemed fine. House was small but decent. He said he'd help me. Said we'd figure it out together. When did it change month 2? Theodore touched his dog tags again. He started talking about money, how expensive groceries were, how much utilities cost, how I needed to contribute more. Were you contributing my whole VA check? My whole Social Security check? $5,500 a month, ma'am, going straight into an account he controlled. Eleanor kept her face neutral, kept documenting, but inside she was calculating. $5,500 a month for 9 months. That was nearly $50,000. And looking at Theodore Wallace, at his hollow cheeks and the way his hospital gown hung off his shoulders, none of that money had been spent on food. Then what happened? Eleanor asked. The food started getting less. Smaller portions, skipped meals. When I'd ask for more, he'd get angry, said I was ungrateful, said he was sacrificing everything to take care of me, and I should be thankful. Theodore's hands shook as he spoke. I tried to call for help. 5 months ago, called the VA hotline when Marcus was at work. Told them I wasn't being fed enough. Needed help. What happened? They sent a social worker, but Marcus came home during the visit. Theodore's voice went flat, defeated. He showed her the kitchen, fully stocked, food everywhere. Told her I had dementia, that I forgot I'd eaten. She believed him. She believed him. 3 words that explained everything. 3 words that showed how easily the system could be fooled by someone who knew how to perform, how to smile, how to lie. What did Marcus do after she left? Eleanor asked, though she already knew the answer. Punished me. No food for 2 days. Said that's what happens when I try to be clever. Eleanor had to look away for a moment, had to compose herself, because this wasn't just abuse. This was premeditated, systematic. A grandson who'd figured out exactly how to isolate his grandfather from every system that should have protected him. Did you try again? Eleanor asked. 3 more times. Tell me. Theodore told her about the second attempt. 3 months ago, his daughter Evelyn had called from California, concerned she hadn't heard from her father in weeks. Marcus told her Theodore was fine, just tired. Evelyn asked to video call. Marcus said Theodore's phone was broken. She mailed a new phone. Marcus intercepted it. Eventually, Evelyn stopped calling, believing her father didn't want contact, believing the lie that Marcus sold her with practiced ease. Third attempt, 6 weeks ago. A neighbor named Patricia Morrison noticed how thin Theodore looked when Marcus briefly brought him outside. She called Adult Protective Services. An investigator came. Marcus was present for the entire interview, legal since he was Theodore's guardian. Theodore was too frightened to speak honestly. The investigator saw a staged performance. Clean bedroom, stock kitchen, empty medication bottles that were just props. Adequate care, the report said. Case closed. And your Marine brothers? Eleanor asked. The men who held the memorial. Theodore's face crumpled. Randall Fletcher, my brother from the Gulf War. We served together, 1st Marine Division, saved each other's lives more times than I can count. He tried to visit 2 weeks ago. What happened? Marcus told him I had Alzheimer's, that I didn't recognize people anymore, that visits would upset me. Theodore wiped his eyes with a shaking hand. Randall believed him. He called the other Marines from our unit, told them I was too far gone. They held a gathering at the VFW. Theodore continued. His voice was breaking now. Celebrated my life in service, toasted to my memory, while I was sitting in Marcus's house, aware of everything, thinking they had abandoned me. Eleanor had to look away, had to breathe. Because this was worse than broken bones or treatable illnesses. This was a man being erased while still alive, mourned while still breathing, forgotten while still fighting. Theodore. Why is Marcus doing this? Money, Theodore said simply. He controls my benefits, $5,500 every month, uses it to pay his mortgage, his truck, his whole life. And when I die, he gets everything. Everything, my house sale money, $240,000, Margaret's life insurance, $50,000, my retirement savings, $85,000. On total, $375,000. $5,000 waiting for him. Theodore looked directly at Eleanor. He's waiting for me to die, ma'am, but he's also helping it along. No medications for 4 months. Minimal food for 9 months. I've lost 47 pounds. My doctor would say I'm malnourished, dehydrated, in critical condition. He paused. Another month or 2 like this, my body will start shutting down. He's starving me to death. Slowly enough that it looks natural. Old man, declining health, sad but expected. And he almost got away with it, Eleanor said quietly. Almost, Theodore agreed. The word hung in the air between them, because right at that moment, Eleanor Grimshaw made a decision that would change everything. She reached into her scrub pocket, pulled out her phone. Theodore tensed, afraid she was calling Marcus back, afraid this brief moment of truth was about to cost him everything. I'm not calling your grandson, Leonor said. She was already scrolling through her contacts. I'm calling my ex-husband. Theodore blinked, confused. Garrett Blackwood, Hells Angels road captain. Eleanor found the number. Former Army, big on veteran advocacy. She saw Theodore's uncertainty, the flicker of hope mixed with doubt. Before you worry, Eleanor continued, Garrett and I divorced amicably 5 years ago. We're still friends, better friends than we were spouses actually, and he takes care of veterans, especially when they're being hurt by people who would be protecting them. The phone rang once, twice. It was almost midnight, but Garrett Blackwood answered on the 3rd ring. Alert. That was one thing about bikers. They were always ready. Ellie, what's wrong, Garrett? I need you at St. Vincent Hospital emergency room, now. Are you hurt? Immediate concern. That was Garrett, protective to his core despite their divorce. Some things didn't change. I'm fine, but I've got a 78-year-old Marine Corps veteran in my emergency room. Staff sergeant, Gulf War, Purple Heart, Bronze Star. Eleanor kept her eyes on Theodore while she spoke, watched him straighten slightly at the recitation of his service record, watched something that looked almost like pride flicker across his face. And his grandson has been starving him for 9 months, stealing his VA benefits, waiting for him to die so he can inherit $375,000. Silence on the other end. 3 seconds of it. Then Garrett's voice came back and it had changed, gone from concern to something harder, something that sounded like purpose. A Marine being abused. Yes, he weighs 118 pounds, Garrett. Should weigh 165. Cigarette burns on his forearm. Grandson hasn't filled his medications in 4 months. Heart meds, blood pressure meds, diabetes medication, all free through the VA. Marcus just stopped getting them. Eleanor was speaking faster now, the details tumbling out like evidence in a trial she was already building. VA Social Services failed him. Adult Protective Services investigated and walked away. His own Marine brothers think he has dementia because the grandson lied to keep them away. They held a memorial gathering for him, Garrett, at the VFU while he's still alive and aware. She took a breath. He just begged me not to send him home because he'd rather die with honor in this hospital than surrender to his grandson. Another pause. Longer this time. Eleanor could hear Garrett processing, making decisions. That was what combat veterans did. They assessed the situation and acted. When Garrett spoke again, his voice was steel. Don't let that veteran leave your emergency room. I'm 15 minutes out. A pause. Ellie, I'm calling Priest. This is code fallen veteran. Every brother within 200 miles is about to know a Marine needs us. The line went dead. Eleanor turned to Theodore. His eyes were wide, hope and fear mixing in equal measure. Like a man who'd been drowning for so long, he wasn't sure he remembered how to breathe air. Theodore. Can I call you Theodore? He nodded. Theodore, I'm going to tell you something and I need you to trust me. My ex-husband Garrett is Hell's Angels. Before you judge. She saw the flicker of uncertainty cross his face. The cultural conditioning, the media images. Bikers meant trouble. These men are veterans, Eleanor continued. Fathers, brothers, they protect people, especially veterans. When Garrett gets here, there will be more of them. Lots more. And they're going to make sure you never go back to Marcus's house. How many is lots more? Theodore's voice was still weak. But there was something new in it now. Something that sounded almost like hope. Eleanor smiled. How many Marines would show up if one of your brothers was in trouble? Understanding dawned in Theodore's eyes. All of them, exactly. So when Garrett calls the Brotherhood about a Marine Corps veteran being abused, neglected, and isolated by someone stealing his benefits. When he tells them a Purple Heart recipient from Desert Storm is in danger. How many Hell's Angels do you think will show up? Theodore stared at her. Then for the first time in 9 months, he felt something he thought he'd lost forever. He felt like someone gave a damn. You really believe me? His voice broke on the words. Theodore. Eleanor squeezed his hand carefully, mindful of the bruises. I've been an ER nurse for 15 years. I know defensive bruises. I know cigarette burns. I know what starvation looks like. She leaned closer. Your grandson is going to say you fell. He's going to say you're confused. He's going to say you have dementia. But I've spent 20 minutes with you. You're sharp as a tack. You remember your service number, your unit, your Marine brothers' names, your wife Margaret, who died 9 months ago. Eleanor positioned herself more firmly between Theodore's bed and the curtained entrance. You don't have dementia. You have a grandson who's trying to murder you slowly for money, and I'm not letting that happen. She looked at him with the same intensity she'd used when she told Intake to code the note in capitals. You survived the Gulf War. You're going to survive this. Theodore's hand went to his dog tags, held them, felt the weight of them. Semper Fi, he whispered. Semper Fi, Eleanor repeated. Now let's get you protected. What Theodore didn't know yet was that Garrett Blackwood had already made 2 more calls by the time he started his motorcycle. The first was to Victor Sullivan, known to everyone as Priest, 61 years old, president of the Toledo Hells Angels chapter. Former Marine Corps himself, served 1990 to 2010. A man who understood exactly what it meant when someone called about a brother in danger. The second call was to Gerald Harrison, known as Bones, 56 years old, retired Toledo police detective, 20 years on the force. Still had contacts in every department that mattered. What Marcus Wallace didn't know was that in exactly 14 minutes, his entire carefully constructed lie was going to start unraveling. And what neither of them knew was that Theodore's story was about to become something bigger than one veteran, one nurse, one phone call. It was about to become a lesson in what happens when you hurt someone who served, when you steal from someone who sacrificed, when you assume that cruelty can hide in plain sight forever. Because brotherhood doesn't run on rules or procedures or office hours. Brotherhood runs on a code, and the code says you don't abandon your brothers, ever. 3 minutes after Eleanor's call, Garrett Blackwood was on his Harley Davidson. The engine roared to life in the frozen December night. 46 years old, 6 feet tall, broad shoulders, wearing his black leather Hells Angels vest over a gray thermal shirt. The road captain patch visible even in the darkness. 5 minutes after that, his phone buzzed with incoming calls. Brothers responding to the code fallen veteran alert that Priest had sent out to every chapter within 200 miles. 8 minutes after Eleanor hung up, Victor Priest Dalton was already coordinating a response that would bring riders from 4 counties. But back in Bay 4, Marcus Wallace was returning. Eleanor heard him before she saw him. The shuffle of boots on linoleum, the smell of cigarette smoke clinging to his jacket like evidence. She turned from her computer station where she'd been documenting Theodore's injuries in painstaking detail. Every bruise, every burn, every sign of systematic neglect. This wasn't just a medical chart anymore. This was evidence. "Everything okay?" Marcus asked. His tone was casual, too casual, the tone of a man who believed he was in complete control. "Mr. Wallace has significant injuries and concerning vital signs," Eleanor said, keeping her voice professionally neutral. "The doctor has ordered a full workup. He'll need to be admitted overnight for observation." It was a lie, but it was a lie that bought time. Marcus's expression shifted, just slightly, a tightening around his eyes. "Admitted no. He's fine, just bumps and bruises from the fall. We can go home." "Hospital protocol for elderly patients with multiple injuries," Eleanor said. She didn't move from her position between the computer and the bed, between Marcus and Theodore. "Doctor's orders. I'm his legal guardian." Marcus's voice had an edge now. "I have power of attorney. I say he can go home. You can speak to the attending physician." Eleanor held his gaze. But protocol is protocol. For a moment, they stared at each other. Two people who understood exactly what was happening beneath the surface of polite conversation. Marcus could sense something had shifted, but he couldn't quite identify what. Theodore sat silent on the gurney, watching this woman, this nurse he'd met less than 30 minutes ago, stand between him and his grandson like a human shield. No one had done that in 9 months. Maybe no one had ever done that. Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, irritated at the interruption. "I need to make a call," he said. "There's a waiting area down the hall." Eleanor pointed, creating distance, creating space. Marcus shot one more look at Theodore. A look that said behave. A look that said, "We'll talk about this at home." A look that Theodore had learned to fear. Then Marcus walked out. The moment he was gone, Eleanor moved fast. "Theodore, I need you to tell me everything from the beginning. We have maybe 10 minutes before he comes back, and I need to know what we're dealing with." Theodore took a shaky breath. Then in the voice of a man who'd been silent for too long, he told her. Everything. The timeline. Month by month. How it had started with small things. Comments about money. Smaller portions of food. Then bigger things. Yelling. Withholding meals. Cigarette burns when Theodore complained. Pushing, shoving. The medications stopped in August. 4 months ago. Heart medication. Blood pressure medication. Diabetes medication. All available free through the VA. Theodore just had to pick them up. But Marcus was the one with the car. Marcus was the one who drove him. And Marcus had stopped going to the pharmacy. Said the medications were too expensive. Said Theodore didn't really need them. Said at 78, what was the point? Theodore told Eleanor about the money, how Marcus had convinced him to sign power of attorney in October. "Just for convenience," Marcus had said. "Just so I can help you manage things. Just to make everything easier." But once Marcus had control, the withdrawals started. $45,000 over 9 months. Pulled from Theodore's savings account. The money from selling the house he and Margaret had owned for 40 years. The money that was supposed to last Theodore through his final years. Through nursing homes if he needed them. Through medical care. Through everything. Gone. Spent on Marcus's truck. Marcus's credit cards. Marcus's life. And when I die, Theodore said quietly, he gets the rest. $240,000 from the house sale. $50,000 from Margaret's life insurance. $85,000 in retirement savings. He looked at Eleanor with eyes that had gone hollow. $375,000 is what my life is worth to my grandson. And he's willing to wait for it, willing to help it along, willing to watch me starve slowly because that looks more natural than anything sudden. How long do you think you have, Eleanor asked. Theodore touched his dog tags. Another month, maybe 2. My body's shutting down already. No heart medication for 4 months. Blood pressure through the roof. Diabetes uncontrolled. Malnourished. Dehydrated. He closed his eyes. I survived taking shrapnel in the Gulf War. Led my unit through Iraqi artillery fire. Earned a Purple Heart for protecting my brothers. And I'm going to die in my grandson's house because I asked for dinner. No, Eleanor said. Her voice was hard. Certain, you're not. Theodore opened his eyes. You're not going to die in his house. You're not going back there, ever. How can you stop him? He has legal guardianship. Power of attorney. The system already failed me 4 times. Why would this time be different? Eleanor pulled out her phone again, showed Theodore the screen. A text message had just come through from Garrett. 15 minutes out. Priest mobilizing, bones coordinating, wire pulling records. You've got 300 brothers incoming. Theodore stared at the message. 300. Eleanor smiled. Marines don't leave brothers behind, neither do we. At 12:14 a.m., exactly 22 minutes after Eleanor's phone call, Garrett Blackwood pushed through the emergency room entrance doors. He wasn't alone. Gerald Bones Harrison was already there. The retired detective, age 56. He'd spent 20 years with Toledo PD and still knew every prosecutor, every judge, every social worker who mattered. He was standing by the intake desk, phone pressed to his ear, already coordinating. Maxwell Wire Thornton pulled up on his motorcycle seconds later, 38 years old. Digital forensics specialist, the kind of man who could pull financial records and search histories faster than most people could open a laptop. Charlotte Doc Winters arrived next, 44, trauma nurse at the VA hospital. Knew the system inside and out, knew which bureaucratic strings to pull and which doors to kick down. And behind them the sound started, low at first, distant, like thunder building on the horizon, then louder. Engines, dozens of them. The deep, unmistakable roar of Harley-Davidsons moving in formation. Eleanor heard it even from inside the emergency room, felt the vibration through the floor, saw the way other nurses looked up, confused, as the sound grew and grew until it seemed to shake the building itself. Garrett found Eleanor at the nurse's station. He was exactly as she remembered. 6 feet tall, muscular build from years of riding and working construction, dark beard streaked with gray, weathered face, kind eyes that had seen combat in Iraq and came home changed but not broken. Bayfor, Eleanor said, Theodore Wallace, Staff Sergeant USMC retired. Everything I told you on the phone is documented in his chart. She handed him a folder. Defensive bruising, cigarette burns, severe malnutrition, medication noncompliance because the grandson stopped getting them. And Garrett Marcus has legal guardianship. We need more than outrage. We need strategy. Garrett nodded, opened the folder, scanned the medical notes with the focus of someone who understood that details mattered, that evidence mattered, that doing this right mattered more than doing it fast. Priest is outside coordinating, Garrett said. We've got Bones pulling legal strings. Doc is ready to facilitate transfer to the VA if needed. Wire's going to pull every financial record, every text message, every search history on Marcus's devices. He looked up from the folder. We're not here to intimidate. We're here to protect and document. Legal, thorough, airtight. How many brothers came, Eleanor asked. Right now, 67 from Toledo chapter. Garrett's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, but Priest made calls. Cleveland chapter is an hour out. That's 89 more. Detroit chapter is rolling. 78. Columbus is 2 hours behind. 66. Eleanor did the math. 300. Give or take Garrett confirmed, all arriving by dawn. Because this isn't just about Theodore Wallace. This is about every veteran who's been abused, neglected, exploited by someone who was supposed to protect them. He closed the folder. This is about showing that when the system fails, brotherhood doesn't. Can I see him? Garrett asked. Eleanor led him to Bay 4. Theodore looked up when the curtain moved. Saw the leather vest first. The Hell's Angels patch. The man who wore it. Tattooed arms. Scarred knuckles. The kind of face that had seen things and survived them. The kind of face Theodore recognized because he'd served with men like this. Not bikers, but warriors. Men who understood duty and honor and protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Garrett approached slowly, deliberately, giving Theodore space to adjust, to accept, to trust. Staff Sergeant Wallace, Garrett said, and his voice carried respect. My name is Garrett Blackwood. I'm a friend of Eleanor's, and I'm here to tell you something that I need you to believe. Theodore waited. You're not going back to that house. Not tonight, not ever, whatever it takes. Legal channels, protective custody, finding you safe housing. We'll handle it. You have my word. Why? Theodore's voice was raw. Why would you help me? You don't know me. Garrett pulled up a chair, sat down so he was at eye level. Not looming, not intimidating, just present. I'm former Army, 2003 to 2006, Iraq. Not as long as your service, not as distinguished. But I learned something over there that stuck with me. He leaned forward. When someone serves, when they put on that uniform and say, I'll stand between my country and danger, they make a promise. And we, everyone who comes after, everyone who benefits from that sacrifice, we make a promise back. What promise? Theodore asked. That we won't forget, that we won't abandon, that when you need us, we show up. Garrett gestured toward the hallway, toward the sound of more motorcycles arriving outside. Every man coming here tonight is living up to that promise. Some of us are veterans, some aren't. But all of us believe that what happened to you is wrong, and we have the power to make it right. Theodore's eyes filled again. The system already tried. VA came. APS came. They all walked away. The system has rules and procedures and bureaucracy, Garrett said. We have something simpler. We have each other. And we have time. Because none of us are leaving it until you're safe. A voice came from the curtain entrance. Staff Sergeant Wallace, Victor Priest Dalton stepped into Bay 4. 61 years old, chapter president, former Marine Corps, served 1990 to 2010. Gray in his beard, authority in every movement. The kind of man who commanded rooms without raising his voice. Theodore tried to sit straighter. Marines recognizing Marines. It's an honor, sir. Priest moved to the bedside. I've made some calls. Detective Harrison is contacting Adult Protective Services emergency line. We're filing a report with witnesses, medical evidence, financial documentation. The district attorney's office will have everything by morning. He stepped closer. Your grandson is going to be arrested, probably within the next 12 hours. Charges will include elder abuse, financial exploitation fraud, and possibly attempted murder, depending on the DA's assessment of intent. Priest's voice was calm, steady. We're also pursuing emergency removal of his guardianship and power of attorney. And I'm coordinating with the VA hospital to get you proper care where Marcus won't have access. How? Theodore whispered. How can you do all this when the system couldn't? Because the system works in pieces, Priest said. One social worker, one investigator, one report at a time. We work as a network. Bones knows the detectives. Doc knows the VA administrators. Wire knows how to pull digital evidence. Garrett knows how to coordinate. And I know how to make sure everyone stays focused on the mission. He placed a hand on Theodore's shoulder, gentle despite the calluses. You're not alone anymore, Marine, and you're not invisible. 67 brothers are outside right now, 300 by dawn. Every single one of them is here because you matter, because your service matters, because no veteran should spend their final years being abused by someone they trusted. Theodore looked at Eleanor, at Garrett, at Priest, at these strangers who'd become protectors in the space of 30 minutes. I don't know what to say, he managed. Say you'll let us help, Eleanor answered. Say you'll trust us to do this right. Theodore took a shaking breath. Then in the command voice he thought he'd lost forever. The voice that had once given orders to Marines under fire. The voice of a staff sergeant who'd led men through hell and brought them home. Yes, ma'am. Affirmative. Garrett smiled. Good. Now here's what happens next. By 1:30 a.m., the St. Vincent Hospital parking lot looked like a gathering of thunder. 67 motorcycles stood in perfect formation across the overflow lot, not blocking traffic, not creating case, just present. Chrome gleaming under the sodium lights, leather vests bearing the same insignia, men standing in small groups, speaking in low voices, waiting for orders. The night security guard had come out twice, uncertain, until Bones showed him his retired detective badge and explained what was happening. After that, the guard just nodded and went back inside. Sometimes you knew when to step aside and let things unfold. Inside Bay 4, the small emergency room bay had been transformed into a makeshift command center. Wire was setting up his laptop on the rolling table, typing rapidly, fingers flying across keys with the precision of someone who'd done this 100 times before. "I've got a warrant being drawn up," Bones announced, walking back in with his phone still in his hand. His voice was gravelly from decades of testimony and interrogations. "Judge Morrison owed me a favor. We can pull Marcus Wallace's financial records, search history, text messages, all of it. Wire's already accessing the accounts," Garrett said. "Here we go." Wire turned the laptop so others could see. Marcus Robert Wallace, age 37, bank records show Theodore's VA benefits and Social Security. $5,500 monthly. Direct deposit into account Marcus controls, starting April 2024. He scrolled through screens, highlighting transactions. Mortgage payment $1,850 monthly, truck payment $580, restaurants, bars, gaming purchases, cigarettes. Wire pointed. "And look at this. Large withdrawals from Theodore's savings account. $45,000 over 9 months. "Where did it go?" Garrett asked. $22,000 for truck down payment last May. $18,000 paying off Marcus's credit cards in June. $5,000 cash in August for gaming computer. Wire's voice was flat, controlled, but angry. Meanwhile, Theodore is having a diabetic crisis and his blood pressure is stroke level. Priest leaned against the wall, arms crossed. 20 years of Marine Corps leadership had taught him to process information fast, make decisions faster. What else? Wire pulled up another screen. Pharmacy records from the VA. Theodore's prescriptions. Atorvastatin for cholesterol. Lisinopril for blood pressure. Metformin for diabetes. All zero copay because VA covers it. Last filled August. 4 months ago, he just stopped getting them, Eleanor asked. From her position beside Theodore's bed, VA sent 15 automated reminders to Marcus's email, Wire said. Pharmacy called twice asking if Theodore needed his medications. Marcus told them he's fine, doesn't need them anymore. Priest straightened. What else do we have? Wire typed. Search history, June through December. He read from the screen. How long can elderly person live without proper medication? What happens if elderly person stops eating? Life expectancy for 78-year-old man. When do you inherit from grandparent? The room went quiet. September. Wire continued. Can Adult Protective Services take away guardianship? How to handle APS investigation? What makes elderly person look like they have dementia? That's when APS came, Eleanor said quietly. 6 weeks ago, he researched how to fool the investigator. November. Wire's voice was tight. How to delay family visits during holidays. Average inheritance amount from grandparents. Can family sue for elder abuse? He looked up. And then 2 days ago, how to cancel family Christmas visit without being suspicious. What happens if elderly person dies right before holidays? Theodore's hands gripped the bed rail. Evelyn, my daughter, she's supposed to visit for Christmas 5 days from now. He's running out of time, Bones said. Daughter shows up, sees your condition, everything falls apart. Priest nodded. Text messages. What do we have? Wire pulled them up. Conversation with someone named Derek Hutchins, July 15th. Marcus writes, dude having grandpa here is paying my mortgage. His VA benefits like $5,500 a month. He scrolled. October 3rd. Marcus asks, how long you think old people last without their heart? Meds, Derek responds. WTF, man. Is your grandpa okay, Marcus? Yeah, he's fine. Just expensive to keep getting his prescriptions. Thinking about cutting back. Derek. That seems dangerous. Marcus. He's 78. He's going to die soon anyway. Why waste money on meds? Eleanor's jaw tightened. Garrett's fists clenched. Priest's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes went cold. December 10th, wire continued. Marcus to Derek. My aunt keeps asking to video call with Grandpa. I keep making excuses. Can't let her see how he looks. Derek, why what's wrong with how he looks, Marcus? He's kind of skinny. She'd freak out. Easier if he just doesn't make it to Christmas. Bones looked at Priest. Premeditated. That's not neglect. That's intent. Priest turned to Theodore. Staff Sergeant Wallace, this grandson of yours has been systematically starving you, stealing from you, researching how to make your death look natural, and waiting for you to die so he can inherit $375,000. Theodore met his eyes. Yes, sir. Priest's voice was gentle but firm. We're going to stop him. We're going to get you safe. We're going to make sure he faces justice for what he's done. He paused. But I need you to understand something. This is going to get harder before it gets easier. There will be court hearings, testimony. Your daughter will need to be involved. The system that failed you 4 times is going to have to work this time because we're going to make it work. Are you ready for that fight? Theodore touched his dog tags. The gesture that grounded him. That reminded him who he was. Staff Sergeant Theodore Henry Wallace, United States Marine Corps, 1st Marine Division, Gulf War veteran, Purple Heart, Bronze Star. Still here. Still fighting, Semper Fi, Theodore said. His voice was stronger now. Marines don't quit. I'm ready, Good Priest said, because your fight just got 300 brothers behind it. Outside in the parking lot, the sound of engines continued. More motorcycles arriving. More brothers responding to the call. Cleveland chapter rolling in. Detroit not far behind. Columbus on the way. 300 men who didn't know Theodore Wallace, but knew that when a veteran needed help, you showed up. You didn't ask questions, didn't debate, didn't wait for someone else to handle it. You just came, because that was the code, and the code didn't fail. The investigation moved fast. Wire's fingers flew across the keyboard, databases opening, financial records scrolling, the digital footprint of a man who thought he'd covered his tracks, but hadn't counted on someone who knew where to look. Theodore watched from his hospital bed. Watched these men he'd never met work with the precision of a military operation. Bones on the phone with judges and prosecutors. Wire pulling records. Garrett coordinating outside with the growing number of motorcycles in the parking lot. It reminded Theodore of something. The planning sessions before missions. The way his unit used to move. Each man knowing his role. No wasted motion. No hesitation. He'd forgotten what that felt like. To be part of something bigger than yourself. To have brothers who had your back without question. To know that when you fell, someone would be there to lift you up. Marcus had tried to make him forget. Had spent 9 months convincing Theodore that he was alone. That no one cared. That he was just an old man whose time had passed and whose only value was the money he'd leave behind. But watching these men work, Theodore felt something stirring. A memory, not of events, but of identity, of who he used to be. Wire turned the laptop toward Priest. Search history is damning. Text messages to Derek Hutchins show clear intent. Financial records prove systematic theft. We've got him cold, Good Priest said. Detective Abbott will have everything she needs for an arrest warrant by 6 a.m. But Priest wasn't looking at the screen anymore. He was looking at Theodore. The old Marine sat propped against pillows, still too thin, still bearing the marks of abuse. But something in his posture had changed. His shoulders were straighter, his eyes more focused. Priest recognized it, had seen it before in combat veterans who'd been beaten down by civilian life, but still carried the warrior inside them. Just needed someone to remind them it was there. Staff Sergeant Wallace, Priest said, moving closer to the bed. Can I ask you something? Yes, sir. Tell me about the Gulf War, your unit, what you did over there. Theodore's hand went to his dog tags. The gesture was automatic. But this time when his fingers touched the metal, something shifted in his expression. "1st Marine Division," Theodore said. His voice was quiet but growing stronger. "Deployed January 1991. Desert Storm. What was your role, squad leader?" "Led 12 men, good men, best men I ever served with." "Tell me about them." And Theodore did, slowly at first, like he was pulling memories from a place he'd locked away. But as he spoke, his voice changed. The weakness fell away. The fear. The resignation. What emerged was the voice of a sergeant, a leader, a warrior. "We were part of the ground offensive. February 24th. Pushing into Kuwait to liberate it from Iraqi occupation. My squad was tasked with securing a strategic position near the border." Theodore's eyes were distant now, seeing something 33 years in the past. "We came under artillery fire, Republican Guard units that hadn't retreated, shells landing all around us. One of my men, Randall Fletcher, was pinned down, separated from the unit by maybe 50 meters, but it might as well have been miles." "What did you do?" "Went to get him," Theodore said it simply, like there had been no other option. "Took 2 men with me, moved under fire, found Fletcher wounded, shrapnel in his leg, couldn't walk." "How'd you get him out?" "Carried him, took fire on the way back, felt something hit my shoulder. Didn't realize I'd been hit until we made it to cover and someone pointed out I was bleeding. That's when you got the Purple Heart." "Yes, sir." Theodore touched his shoulder. The old wound, long healed but never forgotten. Shrapnel lodged near the bone. Surgeons couldn't get it all out. Said it'd cause problems as I got older. They were right. You saved Fletcher's life. He'd have done the same for me. Did do the same for me 2 days later when we got hit again. That's what Marines do. We don't leave brothers behind." The words hung in the air. Eleanor was documenting vitals, but she'd stopped typing, listening, watching Theodore transform before her eyes. This wasn't the broken man Marcus had brought in 3 hours ago. This was Staff Sergeant Theodore Wallace, United States Marine Corps, the man who'd led soldiers through hell, the man who'd earned medals for valor. Marcus had tried to erase him, but he was still there, just needed someone to ask the right questions. "How many men did you lead over your career?" Priest asked. 22 years of service, different units, different deployments, hundreds of men." Theodore's voice was steady now. "Command voice. Taught them everything I knew, brought most of them home. And after the war came back in 91. Married Margaret in 93. She was a nurse at the VA hospital. Met her during physical therapy for my shoulder." He smiled at the memory. "She was tough. Didn't take any of my Marine Corps stubbornness. Told me exactly how things were going to be." The smile faded. "Lost her 9 months ago. Heart attack. Quick. 1 minute she was there. Next she was gone." "I'm sorry," Priest said. Theodore nodded. 52 years together. Raised 2 kids. Built a life. She was my whole world. And then Marcus offered to help. Said he wanted to honor his father, my son Robert. Robert died 15 years ago, car accident. Marcus was 22. I thought maybe having me around would help him feel connected to his dad." Theodore's jaw tightened. "I was wrong. He didn't want connection. He wanted money." Priest pulled up a chair, sat so he was eye level with Theodore. Not standing over him, not intimidating, just present. Marine to Marine. "Theodore, what Marcus did to you, that's not your fault. I should have seen it coming." "No," Priest's voice was firm. "You trusted family. That's not weakness. That's human. Marcus exploited that trust. That's on him, not you." Theodore looked at him, really looked at him, saw the gray in Priest's beard, the lines around his eyes, the scars on his knuckles. A man who'd seen combat and survived, who'd built a life after war, who understood what it meant to carry the weight of service. "How long did you serve?" Theodore asked. 1990 to 2010, 20 years. Iraq, Afghanistan, retired as Master Sergeant. "Why'd you join the Hells Angels?" Priest smiled slightly. "Same reason you joined the Marines, probably. Needed brotherhood, needed purpose, needed to be part of something that mattered." He gestured toward the curtain, toward the sound of motorcycles outside. "War ends, but the need for brothers doesn't. Found that here. Men who understand duty, who show up when called, who don't quit. Like you showed up tonight. Like we all showed up tonight. Because you're one of us. Marine, veteran, brother. Doesn't matter that we didn't serve together. Doesn't matter that we just met. What matters is you needed help, and we answered. Theodore felt something break open in his chest. 9 months of isolation. 9 months of being told he was worthless. 9 months of Marcus convincing him that he was alone and forgotten and waiting to die. All of it crumbling. Because here was proof. 3 hours of proof. That brotherhood didn't end with discharge papers. That service created bonds that outlasted uniforms. That when a veteran fell, other veterans picked him up. Always. I don't know how to thank you, Theodore said, his voice thick. You don't thank us. Priest leaned forward. You survive. You heal. You testify when the time comes. You show Marcus and everyone like him that you can't erase a Marine, can't steal their dignity, can't make them disappear. He stood. And when you're strong again, you help the next veteran who needs it. That's how you thank us, by continuing the mission. Theodore straightened, shoulders back, head up. Yes, sir. Affirmative? The curtain moved. Wire stepped in with his laptop. Got something he said. Pulled Marcus's complete text message history. There's more. Priest and Theodore both turned. Wire pulled up the messages. December 18th, 2 days ago. Marcus to Derek Hutchins. Getting nervous. Aunt Evelyn keeps pushing for Christmas visit. If she sees him, she'll know something's wrong. Need to figure out how to delay her. Derek responds. Just tell her he's sick, flu or something. Marcus, tried that last month. She didn't buy it. She's getting suspicious. Derek, what are you going to do? Wire scrolled to the next message. Marcus responds, honestly, at this point, easier if he just doesn't make it to Christmas. Then I don't have to make excuses. Just tell her he passed peacefully. Sad but expected at his age. The room went cold. Theodore stared at the screen, at the words written by his grandson, his own flesh and blood, casually discussing his death like it was a scheduling problem. He was planning to let me die before Christmas, Theodore said quietly. So Evelyn wouldn't see. Yes, Priest said, but he failed, because you're still here, still fighting. Wire closed the laptop. There's enough here to support attempted murder charges, premeditation, intent, written evidence that he wanted you dead for financial gain. Bones walked in, just got off with Detective Abbott. She's reviewing everything now. Arrest warrant will be ready by 6 a.m. We move on Marcus's house at 7. What about witnesses? Priest asked. Got Patricia Morrison's statement. Neighbor who called APS. And Bones paused. Randall Fletcher is here. Says he's Theodore's Marine brother from the Gulf War. Priest, you called him, I did. Told him the truth. That Theodore doesn't have Alzheimer's. That he's been abused. That Marcus lied to keep him away. Bones looked at Theodore. He wants to see you. If you're up for it. Theodore's face did something complex. Joy and pain and shame all mixed together. The man who'd served beside him. Who'd saved his life and been saved in return. Who'd believed Marcus's lies because why wouldn't he? Who'd organized a memorial service while Theodore sat in Marcus's house, alive and aware and abandoned. Yes, Theodore said. Send him in. Randall Fletcher stepped through the curtain 30 seconds later. 75 years old, still broad-shouldered despite his age, wearing a Gulf War veteran baseball cap and a jacket bearing his VFW post number. His face was weathered, lined, the face of a man who'd seen combat and carried it with him. When he saw Theodore, his expression crumbled. Tommy, just that, one word, the nickname from 33 years ago, and both men started crying. Randall crossed the space between them, grabbed Theodore's hand, both of them shaking. I'm so sorry, Randall said, his voice breaking. He told me you didn't remember me, told me you had Alzheimer's, that you didn't recognize anyone, that visits would upset you. Tears running down his face. We held a memorial, Tom, at the VF, 8 of us from the unit. We honored you, told stories about Desert Storm, about you carrying me out under fire, about your leadership, your courage. He gripped Theodore's hand harder. We toasted your memory while you were alive. God forgive me. We left you behind. You didn't know, Theodore managed, his own tears flowing freely now. I should have known. Randall's voice was raw. Should have insisted on seeing you. Marines don't leave brothers behind, and I left you behind. You're here now, Theodore said. That's what matters. Randall pulled up a chair, sat close, didn't let go of Theodore's hand. Tell me everything. What he did, how long, all of it. And Theodore did. Told Randall the whole story, month by month. The food withheld, the medications stopped, the isolation, the fear, the slow realization that Marcus was waiting for him to die. Told him about calling the VA, about the social worker who believed Marcus's dementia story, about Patricia Morrison calling APS, about Evelyn being cut off. Told him about the memorial service, how he'd heard about it through a neighbor who mentioned it, how he'd sat in Marcus's house knowing his brothers thought he was dead inside. That was the worst part, Theodore said. Worse than the hunger, worse than the pain. Knowing you all thought I'd forgotten you, that I'd lost my mind, that I wasn't worth visiting. Randall was crying openly now. Other brothers in the room respectfully turned away, gave them space. We should have come anyway, Randall said. Should have pushed past Marcus. Should have trusted our instincts. He looked at Theodore. You know what I said at the memorial? I said you were the best squad leader I ever served under, that you saved my life in Kuwait, that I owed everything to you. And I meant it, Tom. Every word. Theodore squeezed his hand. I know. So I'm here now, and I'm not leaving. Whatever you need. Testimony, support, a place to stay when you get out of here. I'm here. Thank you, Fletch. The old nickname. From the war, from firefights and fear and brotherhood forged in combat. Randall smiled through his tears. Haven't heard you call me that in years. Haven't felt like myself in years, Theodore admitted. Priest stepped forward. Mr. Fletcher, we need your statement. What Marcus told you, when he prevented you from visiting. Everything you remember, Randall nodded, wiped his eyes, shifted from grieving friend to focused witness. 2 weeks ago, I called Marcus's house. Wanted to visit, check on Tom. Marcus said Theodore was declining rapidly, that he had Alzheimer's, that he didn't recognize people anymore, that visits caused agitation. Go on. Marcus said the doctor recommended against visits, that it was better to remember Theodore how he was, that seeing him confused would be too painful. And you believed him. Why wouldn't I? Randall's voice was bitter. He was family. I thought he was taking care of Tom. I thought I was respecting Theodore's dignity by staying away. What did you do then? Called the other Marines from our unit. 8 of us scattered across Ohio. Told them Theodore was too far gone. We decided to honor him while we could still share the memories. The memorial service. Yes, December 10th. 2 weeks ago, at the VFW hall, we gathered, shared stories, toasted Theodore's service, his courage, his leadership. Randall looked at Theodore. We celebrated your life while you were still living it, and I will never forgive myself for that. It wasn't your fault, Theodore said again, stronger this time. Marcus lied, convincingly. He fooled the VA, he fooled APS, he fooled Evelyn, he fooled you. The man is a skilled manipulator. Priest nodded, and that manipulation is going to be his downfall, because now we have documentation, evidence, testimony from multiple witnesses showing a pattern of systematic isolation and deception. Bones was writing everything down. Detailed notes, times, dates, specific statements Marcus made. This is good, Bones said. Combined with the financial records and search history, we're building an airtight case. Wire looked up from his laptop. Detective Abbott just emailed. Arrest warrant approved. Officers move on Marcus's residence 0700 hours. Just under 6 hours from now. Theodore looked at the assembled men. At Priest and Garrett and Bones. At Wire with his laptop full of evidence. At Eleanor, who'd made the first call. At Randall, who'd come the moment he learned the truth. What do you need from me? Theodore asked. Priest turned to him. What do you mean? I mean, I'm not just sitting here while you all do the work. I'm part of this. Tell me what you need. Something shifted in the room. The other men straightened, because they heard it. The change in Theodore's voice. Not the weak whisper of a victim, not the defeated resignation of someone broken. Command voice, sergeant voice, the voice of a leader taking charge. Wire, Theodore said. Those financial records. Do they show where Marcus spent the money? Yeah, no. Wire pulled up the spreadsheet. $22,000 on a truck, $18,000 paying off credit cards, $5,000 on gaming equipment, the rest in smaller amounts. Restaurants, entertainment, personal spending. Can you separate it out? Show what percentage went to household expenses versus Marcus's personal purchases. Wire's fingers flew. Give me 2 minutes. Bones. Theodora continued. The witness statements. Do we have documentation from the VA social worker who investigated the APS investigator? Working on it, Bones said. Should have those files by 0400. Good, because I want every person who tried to help documented, not to blame them, but to show the pattern, to show how Marcus manipulated each intervention. Theodore looked at Priest. And I want to testify, when this goes to trial, I want to look Marcus in the eye and tell the court exactly what he did. Priest studied him. You understand what that means. Defense attorney will try to discredit you, claim you're confused, claim you have dementia, that you're misremembering. Let them try, Theodore said. I'm Staff Sergeant Theodore Wallace, 22 years United States Marine Corps. I remember my service number, my unit designations, the names of every man I served with, the date of every deployment. His voice hardened. I remember my wife Margaret, 52 years of marriage. I remember my daughter Evelyn, my son Robert. I remember the layout of my house, my bank account numbers, my medication list. He looked around the room. I remember everything Marcus tried to make me forget, and I'm going to make damn sure the court knows it. Eleanor smiled from her position by the monitors. There he is. Garrett nodded. There's the Marine. Outside, dawn was starting to break. The parking lot was full now. 293 motorcycles. Toledo, Cleveland, Detroit, Columbus chapters. Men who'd ridden through the night because a Marine needed help. Priest walked to the window, gestured for Theodore to join him. Wire brought the wheelchair over, helped Theodore into it. His movements were still slow, still weak, but his posture was different. Shoulders back, head up. Eleanor wheeled him to the window. The parking lot stretched below them, row after row of motorcycles, chrome gleaming in the early morning light, men in leather vests standing in formation, not talking, not moving, just waiting, waiting for orders, waiting to be useful, waiting to help a veteran they'd never met because that was what brothers did. Theodore stared at the sight. 300 men who'd dropped everything, who'd ridden through 16 below zero weather, who'd given up sleep and warmth and comfort. For him, a 78-year-old Marine who'd been invisible for 9 months, who'd been forgotten, who'd been left behind. Not anymore. These are your brothers, Priest said quietly. Every single one down there came because you matter, because your service matters, because Marines don't leave Marines behind. He paused, and neither do we. Theodore's hand went to his dog tags, held them, felt the weight. I want to talk to them, he said. Priest looked at him. You sure you're strong enough? I'm a Marine, Theodore said. I'm strong enough. 15 minutes later, they had Theodore in the wheelchair on the ground floor. Priest had made calls. The brothers assembled in the parking lot. Not crowding, not pushing, just gathering in a loose formation. 300 men in leather vests, different chapters, different backgrounds, different stories, but all united by the same code. Protect, serve, don't abandon. Priest pushed Theodore's wheelchair to the front, positioned him so he could see them all, so they could see him, a small, thin man in a hospital gown, IV port still in his arm, bruises visible on his skin, dog tags hanging at his throat. But sitting straight, shoulders back, head high, the brothers went silent. Priest's voice carried across the parking lot. Brothers, this is Staff Sergeant Theodore Wallace, United States Marine Corps, 1st Marine Division, Gulf War veteran, Purple Heart, Bronze Star. He paused. For 9 months, his grandson has been starving him, stealing his benefits, isolating him from family and Marine brothers, waiting for him to die so he could inherit $375,000. Angry murmurs rippled through the crowd, but Staff Sergeant Wallace is a fighter. He survived Iraqi artillery. He led men through combat. He saved lives under fire. And tonight he refused to surrender. Priest stepped aside, gave Theodore the floor. Theodore looked out at 300 faces, men who'd come for him, men he didn't know, men who'd proven that brotherhood transcended patches and chapters and organizations. My name is Theodore Wallace, he said. His voice was weak, but it carried. I'm 78 years old, Staff Sergeant, United States Marine Corps, retired. He took a breath. For 9 months, I've been invisible, starved, isolated, forgotten. My Marine brothers held a memorial service for me while I was still alive because my grandson convinced them I had Alzheimer's. His voice grew stronger. But last night, one nurse refused to look away. Eleanor Grimshaw, she made one phone call to Garrett Blackwood, and he called all of you. Theodore looked across the assembled brothers. You came. 300 men I've never met, dropped everything, rode through the freezing night, stood in this parking lot for hours. For me. He paused. You gave me back something my grandson tried to steal. My dignity, my voice, my identity as a Marine. His hand went to his dog tags. In Desert Storm, I learned that Marines don't leave brothers behind. I carried that lesson for 33 years. Thought I'd lost it. Thought I'd been abandoned. But I was wrong. Because you're all here and you've shown me that brotherhood doesn't end with discharge papers. Doesn't end with age. Doesn't end ever. Theodore's voice filled with emotion. I'm going to testify. I'm going to fight. I'm going to make sure my grandson faces justice for what he did. Not just to me, but to show every person who thinks they can abuse a veteran and get away with it that they're wrong. He straightened even more. Because I'm still a Marine, still a warrior, still here. His voice rose. Semper Fidelis, always faithful. I kept faith with my country for 22 years. You've kept faith with me tonight, and I will keep faith with every veteran who needs help from this day forward. He looked at Priest, at Garrett, at Randall, at Eleanor. Thank you, all of you, for reminding me who I am. The parking lot erupted, not with cheers, with something deeper, a low sound of acknowledgement, of respect. Some brothers saluted, others just nodded. They'd come to help a veteran in danger. They'd witnessed a warrior reclaim himself. Across town in a small house on Riverside Drive, Marcus Wallace was sleeping. He had no idea that in 45 minutes, 3 Toledo police cruisers and an unmarked detective car would pull up to his house. That Detective Louise Abbott would knock on his door with an arrest warrant. That his carefully constructed lie was about to collapse. He had no idea that right now 300 bikers were standing in a hospital parking lot. That digital forensics had pulled his search history. That text messages were being compiled. That witnesses were giving statements. He had no idea that the grandfather he'd been starving for 9 months had just declared war. Marcus Wallace slept, and Theodore Wallace stood guard, not physically. He was still too weak for that, but in spirit, in determination, in the absolute certainty that he would not quit, would not surrender, would not let Marcus win. Because Marines never quit, and Theodore Wallace was still a Marine. 6:53 a.m. The sun was just breaking over Toledo, Ohio. December 21st, the shortest day of the year. But for Marcus Wallace, the darkness was only beginning. He stood in his kitchen, making breakfast, humming along to some pop song on the radio, cracking eggs into a pan, checking his phone between stirs, planning his day. He'd go back to the hospital around 10. Make a scene if they tried to keep Theodore. Probably get him released. Home by noon. Everything back under control. Simple. Easy. Just like the last 9 months had been. The doorbell rang. Marcus set down the spatula, annoyed at the interruption, wiped his hands on a dish towel, walked to the front door still thinking about breakfast and phone calls and getting his grandfather back before anyone asked too many questions. He opened the door. 3 Toledo police cruisers sat in his driveway, an unmarked detective car behind them. 6 officers, all looking at him. Detective Louise Abbott stood on his front step, 48 years old, 20 years with the Elder Abuse Unit. She'd seen every variation of cruelty that family members could inflict on vulnerable adults. Seen financial exploitation, seen neglect, seen systematic abuse. This case was all 3. Marcus Robert Wallace, she said, holding up her badge. Yeah, you're under arrest for elder abuse, financial exploitation, fraud, and grand theft. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Marcus's face went through a sequence of expressions in 3 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, anger, fear. What? This is insane. I take care of my grandfather. I do everything for him. You can explain that to your lawyer, Abbott said. Turn around, hands behind your back. Officers moved past him into the house, fanning out. Marcus tried to process what was happening, tried to find the angle, the explanation, the lie that would make this go away. But Abbott was already pulling his arms behind him, metal handcuffs clicking shut around his wrists, the sound impossibly loud in the quiet morning. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you. Do you understand these rights as I have explained them to you? You want a lawyer, Marcus said, his voice shaking now. I want a lawyer right now. That's your right. Officers searched the house, following the warrant, looking for evidence that Wire's digital investigation had already found but needed physical confirmation. They found Theodore's bedroom upstairs, the tiny room with a mattress on the floor. No heat. A bucket in the corner because the bathroom was downstairs and Theodore couldn't always make it. They found the latch lock on the outside of the door, the lock that Marcus could secure from the hallway, trapping Theodore inside. They photographed everything. They found the empty medication bottles lined up on a shelf in Marcus's bedroom. Props. Bottles that had never been refilled but were kept visible in case anyone asked questions. They found Marcus's fully stocked kitchen, the refrigerator full of food that Theodore had been denied, the pantry with enough supplies to feed 2 people comfortably, or one person very well and another not at all. They found Marcus's gaming setup, thousands of dollars of equipment, bought with Theodore's money. They photographed everything. Detective Abbott walked Marcus to the cruiser, his face pressed against the door frame as they positioned him. The same hands that had pushed Theodore, that had withheld food, that had withdrawn $45,000 from accounts that weren't his, now cuffed, now caught, now facing consequences. Marcus tried one more time. This is a misunderstanding. My grandfather has dementia. He doesn't know what he's saying. Your grandfather, Abbott said quietly, doesn't have dementia. He has a grandson who systematically starved him, stole from him, and researched how long elderly people survive without medication. She opened the cruiser door. We have your search history, Marcus, your text messages, your financial records, witness statements, medical documentation. We have everything. Marcus went pale. And your grandfather is awake, alert, oriented, and very willing to testify. She guided him into the back seat. Shut the door. The cruiser pulled away, Marcus staring out the window at his house, his life, his carefully constructed plan, all of it collapsing. At St. Vincent Hospital, Wire received confirmation at 8:15 a.m. Suspect in custody, bail hearing scheduled 1400 hours today. Theodore was sitting up in bed when Wire told him. He'd been transferred to a regular room 3 hours ago, no longer critical. Just monitoring and nutrition support while they stabilize his condition. He's arrested, Theodore said. Not a question, a statement. Yes, sir. Wire showed him his phone. Detective Abbott recommends bail be set high enough that he won't make it out. Good. Priest entered the room carrying coffee. Behind him, Garrett. Behind Garrett, Eleanor finishing her shift. It's done, Priest said. Marcus is in custody at Toledo Police Department. Arraignment in 2 hours. What happens now? Theodore asked. Now we make sure you're taken care of, Priest said, and we build the case. Over the next 6 hours, pieces fell into place with military precision. Bones contacted Adult Protective Services, filed an emergency petition to remove Marcus's guardianship and power of attorney. Got a judge to sign temporary orders giving Theodore's daughter Evelyn control of his affairs until permanent arrangements could be made. Doc coordinated with the VA hospital. Arranged transfer from St. Vincent to the VA facility on Arlington Avenue, a place where Theodore would get proper care, where nurses understood combat injuries and PTSD and the particular pride that made asking for help feel like surrender. Wire compiled the complete evidence package, financial records, search history, text messages, pharmacy records, witness statements from Eleanor Patricia Morrison Randall Fletcher, medical documentation showing the timeline of abuse written on Theodore's body in bruises and burns, and 47 pounds of missing weight. And Eleanor made one more call, to California, to a woman named Evelyn Wallace, who hadn't spoken to her father in 3 months because she'd believed Marcus's lies. The phone rang 4 times before a woman answered, cautious, uncertain. Hello, is this Evelyn Wallace? Yes, who's calling? My name is Eleanor Grimshaw. I'm an emergency room nurse at St. Vincent Hospital in Toledo. I'm calling about your father, Theodore. Silence. Then Evelyn's voice came back sharp with fear. Is he okay? What happened? He's alive. He's safe, but I need you to sit down because what I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult. Eleanor told her everything. The abuse, the starvation, the isolation, Marcus's lies about dementia and confusion, the memorial service held while Theodore was still alive, the $45,000 stolen, the medication stopped, the plan to let Theodore die before Christmas. Evelyn Wallace cried, then stopped crying. Then her voice went cold and hard. Where is Marcus now in custody? Arrested this morning. Bail hearing this afternoon. Good, I'm getting on a plane. I'll be there tonight. Your father asked me to tell you something, Eleanor said. He said it's not your fault, that Marcus lied to you, that he doesn't want you to feel guilty. Evelyn's voice cracked. I should have known, should have pushed harder. That's what everyone says. But manipulation works because it's convincing. Marcus fooled the VA, fooled Adult Protective Services, fooled your father's Marine brothers. You're not weak for being fooled. He's skilled at lying. Tell my father I'm coming. Tell him I love him. Tell him I'm so sorry. I will. And Evelyn's voice steadied. Thank you for calling me, for calling Garrett, for not looking away. It's what anyone should have done. But most people don't, so thank you. At 2 p.m., Marcus Wallace stood before Judge Catherine Frost for his bail hearing. His public defender, a young woman named Sarah Murphy, argued for low bail. Marcus had no prior record, wasn't a flight risk, had ties to the community, a steady job. Detective Abbott presented the evidence package. Judge Frost reviewed the documents in silence. Financial records showing systematic theft, text messages showing intent, search history showing premeditation, medical records showing the result of 9 months of abuse. The courtroom was quiet except for the sound of papers turning. Finally, Judge Frost looked up, looked at Marcus standing beside his attorney, looked at the evidence spread before her. Mr. Wallace, her voice was cold. You systematically abused, starved, and financially exploited your grandfather, a decorated Marine Corps veteran who served this country with honor during the Gulf War. Marcus started to speak. His attorney put a hand on his arm. Quiet. You stole $45,000 from his accounts. You prevented him from receiving medical care. You isolated him from family and friends who could have helped him. You researched how long elderly people survive without medication and inheritance timelines while he was dying in your house. Judge Frost set down the papers. Your text messages to Derek Hutchins indicate you believed it would be easier if your grandfather didn't make it to Christmas, so you wouldn't have to make excuses to his daughter, so you could collect his inheritance without interference. She paused. Bail is set at $250,000. You're remanded to county custody pending trial. Marcus's face went white. I don't have that kind of money. No, Judge Frost said, her voice cutting. You don't, because you spent it all while your grandfather starved. She looked at the bailiff. Take him into custody. Court adjourned. At 4 p.m. that same day, Theodore Wallace was transferred to the VA hospital. The ambulance ride was smooth. Paramedics who understood that this patient wasn't just elderly, wasn't just sick, was a veteran who'd earned gentle care through decades of service. Doc met them at the entrance, coordinated the transfer personally, got Theodore settled in a private room on the 3rd floor. The room was warm, clean, had a window with real curtains, a television, a call button within easy reach, water, food available whenever he wanted it, simple things that meant everything. Dr. Robert Hayes reviewed Theodore's chart. 48 years old, chief of geriatric medicine at the VA, specialized in caring for aging veterans, Staff Sergeant Wallace, Dr. Hayes said, looking at Theodore with respect. We're going to take good care of you here. Thank you, sir. You've lost 47 pounds in 9 months. Haven't had blood pressure medication in 4 months. Blood pressure is 180 over 110. You're lucky you didn't have a stroke. The doctor pulled up a chair. Diabetes has been uncontrolled. Blood sugar at 340, severe malnutrition, dehydration, early signs of organ stress. He met Theodore's eyes. Conservatively, we're looking at 2 weeks of careful refeeding. Medication management. Hydration. You'll need physical therapy for muscle loss. Counseling for trauma. Dr. Hayes smiled slightly. But you're strong. Marines usually are. You're going to recover. How long until I can walk without help? 2 weeks with therapy. Maybe less. You've got good bone structure, good baseline fitness, even after the weight loss. Your body remembers being strong. We just need to remind it. That night, they brought Theodore his first real meal in 9 months. Not much. His stomach couldn't handle much after such prolonged starvation. But it was warm, and it was his, and nobody was going to take it away. Chicken broth, crackers, ginger ale, applesauce. Theodore ate slowly, savoring every spoonful, not because it tasted particularly good. Hospital food never did, but because it represented something Marcus had tried to steal. Choice, agency, the simple dignity of eating when you were hungry. Eleanor stopped by after her shift at 7 p.m., found Theodore sitting up in bed, dog tags resting on his chest, watching the evening news with an expression she hadn't seen before. Peace. How are you feeling? She asked. Safe, Theodore said. The word came out thick with emotion. I feel safe. Eleanor sat in the visitor's chair. Your daughter Evelyn called. She's on a flight from California right now. Should land around 10. She's been crying on the phone with me for 20 minutes, apologizing for not knowing, for not pushing harder to visit. Not her fault, Theodore said immediately. Marcus lied to her, made her think I didn't want contact. She knows that now, and she's furious. Eleanor smiled slightly. She's already contacted a lawyer about getting Marcus's guardianship revoked permanently and taking over your financial affairs herself. She shouldn't have to. Theodore, Eleanor's voice was gentle but firm. Let people help you. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. He nodded slowly, still learning to accept this new reality, where help didn't come with strings attached, where asking for needs didn't result in punishment, where being vulnerable didn't mean being prey. The next morning, Evelyn Wallace arrived, 54 years old, her father's daughter in the set of her jaw and the determination in her eyes. She walked into Theodore's hospital room and stopped, just stopped and stared. At the man in the bed who'd lost so much weight, his hospital gown hung off his frame, at the bruises still visible on his arms, at the IV line delivering fluids, at the dog tags at his throat, at her father, who she believed was fine, who Marcus had convinced her didn't want contact, who she'd let slip away because she'd trusted family. Dad, she whispered. Theodore held out his arms. Evelyn crossed the room and hugged him carefully, mindful of the bruises, both of them crying. I'm so sorry, she said. I should have known. Should have come sooner. Should have ignored Marcus and just shown up. Stop, Theodore said, his command voice returning. You were lied to. You did what you thought was right. Marcus manipulated you. That's on him, not you, but I'm your daughter. I should have protected you, and I'm your father. Theodore pulled back so he could look at her. And I'm telling you to stop carrying guilt that isn't yours. You're here now. That's what matters. Evelyn wiped her eyes. I'm not leaving. I'm taking 2 weeks off work. I'm staying in Toledo until we figure out long-term plans. And I'm taking over all your finances and legal affairs. She pulled out paperwork. Lawyer drew these up last night. Emergency guardianship, power of attorney, bank account transfers, everything Marcus had. I'm taking back. Good, Theodore said. And I'm going to be here for the trial every day, front row. So Marcus has to look at me while they read his text messages about letting you die before Christmas. Her voice was steel. He tried to steal my father. He's going to pay for that. Over the next 2 weeks, Theodore healed. Not completely. 47 pounds and 9 months of trauma don't disappear in 14 days. But his body started remembering what it meant to be fed, to be medicated properly, to be cared for. Day 1, he couldn't lift a water glass without shaking. Day 3, he sat up unassisted. Day 5, he walked 10 steps with a walker. Day 7, he walked the length of the hallway. Day 10, he started physical therapy, rebuilding muscle, rebuilding strength, rebuilding the body that Marcus had systematically destroyed. Day 14, he walked the hallway independently, stopped at other veterans' rooms, introduced himself, shared his story. Staff Sergeant Theodore Wallace, United States Marine Corps, 1st Marine Division, Gulf War, and each time he said it, he stood a little straighter. Bones arrived with paperwork on day 4. Emergency protective order granted, he explained. walking through each page. Marcus Wallace is prohibited from any contact with you. No phone calls, no letters, no third-party messages. He can't come within 500 feet of you. Violation means immediate arrest. What about the trial? Theodore asked. Arraignment was 3 days ago. Marcus pled not guilty. Trial is scheduled for April. 4 months from now. Bones pulled out another document. DA's office is pursuing multiple felony charges. Elder abuse causing severe bodily harm. Financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Grand theft. Fraud. They're also considering attempted murder, but that's harder to prove. Requires demonstrating specific intent to kill, rather than just neglect leading toward death. The text messages help. Bones continued. The search history helps. Doesn't make it to Christmas is pretty damning. DA thinks she can get 8 to 12 years. How long until I have to testify? 4 to 6 months. You'll need to be ready. Defense attorney will try to discredit you. Claim you're confused. Claim you have dementia. Let them try, Theodore said. I'm ready. On day 10, Garrett and Priest arrived with a proposal. We've been talking, Garrett said. You can't go back to Marcus's house, obviously. And you can't live alone, not with mobility issues and recovery needs. What about assisted living? Theodore asked. Evelyn had returned to California after the first week. Had to get back to work. But she called every day, video chatted every evening, promised to fly back for the trial. There's a place, Priest said, Liberty House. Veterans residence in North Toledo. Private rooms, communal dining, medical staff on site, activities, transportation to VA hospital for appointments. He pulled up information on his phone. It's subsidized, runs about $1,800 a month for veterans with disability benefits, much less than standard assisted living. Theodore looked at the pictures. Clean rooms, other veterans, American flags on the walls, a sense of community. Can I bring my things? He asked quietly. My Marine Corps photos, Margaret's picture. It's your room, Garrett said. You make it home. Theodore studied the images. Imagined living there, surrounded by other veterans. People who understood service, who wouldn't judge him for needing help, who'd see the uniform before they saw the age. I'd like to visit it, he said. Before I decide. We'll arrange it, Priest said. On day 12, the Marine brothers came. Randall Fletcher organized it. 8 veterans from Theodore's Gulf War unit. All of them in their 70s now. Some using canes, some with walkers. But standing straight when they entered Theodore's hospital room. They didn't say much at first, just shook his hand one by one. Brothers recognizing brothers. Some had tears in their eyes. All of them looked at Theodore with a mixture of relief and lingering guilt. Relief that he was alive. Guilt that they'd believed Marcus's lies. We should have known, Randall said finally. Should have insisted on seeing you. You're seeing me now, Theodore replied. And I look a hell of a lot better than I did 2 weeks ago. That broke the tension. Someone laughed. Someone else made a joke about hospital food. And just like that, they were a unit again. Talking, remembering, planning a proper gathering once Theodore was discharged. Not a memorial, but a celebration. Welcome back, brother. We missed you. Later that afternoon, Priest stopped by with something wrapped in brown paper. He set it on Theodore's bed, opened it carefully. Inside was a leather vest, black, Hell's Angels insignia on the front, but across the back custom embroidered in gold a thread, honorary member, Staff Sergeant Wallace, Semper Fi. Theodore ran his fingers over the leather, the embroidery, the weight of it. You don't have to wear it, Priest said, but the Brotherhood voted. Unanimous. You're one of us now. I'm honored, Theodore said quietly. We're honored, Priest corrected. You served this country for 22 years. You survived the Gulf War. You survived Marcus. You were still fighting. That's what Brotherhood recognizes. Not just the battles you won, but the ones you refused to surrender in. He draped the vest carefully over the chair beside Theodore's bed. When you're ready, when you're healed, there's a place for you at the clubhouse. Coffee's always on. Brothers are always around. You need anything, ride to an appointment, help with paperwork, just someone to talk to who gets it, you call. Theodore looked at this man, this biker, this former Marine, this stranger who'd become a protector in the span of hours. Felt something he hadn't felt in 9 months. Belonging. 2 weeks after admission, Theodore was discharged to Liberty House. Evelyn flew in for the move, helped him arrange his room on the second floor, corner unit with 2 windows, Marine Corps photos on the wall, unit photos from Desert Storm, commendation certificates, Purple Heart, Bronze Star, Margaret's picture on the nightstand, their wedding photo, her smile captured forever in silver frame, his dress uniform hanging in the closet, dog tags on their hook by the bed, and on the chair the Hells Angels vest. Honorary member, Semper Fi. The first night in his new home, Theodore lay in his own bed, in his own room, with a full stomach and his medications properly managed and nobody locking him in. He could hear other residents in the hallway, laughter from the communal room where someone was watching a basketball game. Normal sounds, safe sounds. He reached up and touched his dog tags. Wallace Theodore H. USMC, still a Marine, still fighting, still here. For the first time in 9 months, Theodore Wallace slept through the night. The trial began on April 16, 2025, 4 months after the arrest. 4 months of preparation. 4 months of Theodore getting stronger, gaining weight, rebuilding muscle, rebuilding life. He walked into the courthouse on his own. No walker, no cane, just the slight stiffness of old combat injuries and age. But walking, strong. He'd gained back 38 of the 47 pounds. Weighed 156 now. Still thin, but healthy, vital. He wore civilian clothes for the first 2 days of trial, sat in the front row with Evelyn on one side and Randall on the other, watched the prosecution present their case. Wire testified about the financial records. 45,000 stolen. Search history showing premeditation. Text messages showing intent. Detective Abbott testified about the arrest. The evidence found in Marcus's house. The latch lock on the outside of Theodore's bedroom door. Patricia Morrison testified about calling APS, about seeing Theodore's decline, about believing Marcus's lies. Randall Fletcher testified about the memorial service, about being told Theodore had Alzheimer's, about the guilt of mourning a brother who was still alive. Eleanor Grimshaw testified about the triage note. Don't send me home, about the bruises and burns, about making the phone call that saved a life. The defense attorney tried to discredit each witness, tried to paint Marcus as a devoted grandson, overwhelmed by caregiving responsibilities, tried to suggest Theodore was confused, mistaken, suffering from dementia that made him misremember events. The jury listened, took notes, looked skeptical. On day 3, the prosecution called their final witness, Staff Sergeant Theodore Henry Wallace. Theodore stood, walked to the witness stand. He'd chosen his clothes carefully that morning, not civilian clothes. His Marine Corps dress uniform, ribbons on his chest, Purple Heart, Bronze Star, service ribbons from 22 years and multiple deployments, dog tags visible at his throat. The courtroom went silent. Theodore placed his hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, sat in the witness chair, looked directly at Marcus sitting at the defense table. Marcus looked away first. The prosecutor, a woman named Jennifer Lawson, approached. Please state your name for the record. Staff Sergeant Theodore Henry Wallace. United States Marine Corps, retired. How long did you serve? 22 years. 1983 to 2005. What was your final rank, Staff Sergeant? E6. And you're wearing your dress uniform today. Why? Theodore's voice was steady, clear. Because I want this court to know who I am. Not who my grandson tried to make me. Not a confused old man with dementia. Not a burden, not someone whose life doesn't matter. He touched his Purple Heart ribbon. I'm a Marine. I served my country. I led men in combat. I saved lives. I earned these ribbons through blood and sacrifice. And I want the jury to see that before they hear what my grandson did to me. Lawson nodded. Staff Sergeant Wallace, tell the jury what happened starting in March 2024. And Theodore did. For 47 minutes he testified. His voice never wavered. His memory was perfect. Names, dates, amounts, timeline. He described Margaret's death, the grief, the vulnerability. Marcus's offer to help. He described the first months, the gradual change, food withheld, money stolen, medications stopped. He described calling the VA, the social worker who believed Marcus's lies. Patricia Morrison calling APS, the investigator who saw a staged performance. He described his daughter being cut off, his phone intercepted, his isolation complete. He described the memorial service, learning his Marine brothers thought he was dead inside, the absolute devastation of being mourned while still alive. He described the text messages. Marcus telling Derek Hutchins it would be easier if Theodore didn't make it to Christmas, and he described the moment, December 20th, when he whispered to a nurse, "Don't send me home," and she actually listened. The jury was crying, 3 women openly, 2 men, both veterans, sitting rigid with controlled fury. Lawson let the testimony breathe, let it settle. Then she asked one final question. Staff Sergeant Wallace, in your own words, what was your grandson trying to do? Theodore looked at Marcus, held his gaze, made him look. He was trying to erase me, to make me invisible, to steal my money and my dignity and my identity and wait for me to die so he could inherit $375,000. His voice strengthened, but he made one mistake. He forgot I'm a Marine, and Marines don't quit, even when we're weak, even when we're alone, even when the enemy thinks we're defeated. Theodore's hand went to his dog tags. I called for help 4 times. The system failed 4 times, but one nurse refused to look away. She made one phone call, and 300 brothers I'd never met showed up. They gave me back my voice. Now I'm using it. He leaned forward, looked directly at the jury. Marcus tried to erase me, but I'm standing here, wearing my uniform, reclaiming my name, reclaiming my service, reclaiming my life. Semper Fidelis, always faithful. I kept faith with my country. My brothers kept faith with me, and I'm asking you to keep faith with justice. Silence in the courtroom, absolute silence. Then Lawson said quietly, "No further questions, Your Honor." The defense attorney stood, approached, asked Theodore about his memory, his medications, his age. Theodore answered every question with precision, cited his service number, his unit designations, the names of men he'd served with, the dates of deployments, his wife's birthday, his daughter's address, his bank account numbers. The defense attorney tried for 20 minutes, then sat down. No further questions. The jury deliberated for 47 minutes. Guilty on all counts: elder abuse, financial exploitation, grand theft, fraud, attempted murder. Marcus showed no emotion, just stared at the table. Sentencing was set for 2 weeks later. On May 2nd, Marcus Wallace stood before Judge Frost again. She reviewed the sentencing reports, the victim impact statements from Theodore and Evelyn, the psychological evaluation, the financial accounting. Then she looked at Marcus. "Mr. Wallace, you systematically abused your grandfather for 9 months. You stole $45,000 from him. You researched how long he would survive without medication. You told your friend it would be easier if he didn't make it to Christmas." She paused. "You tried to erase a decorated Gulf War Marine veteran for money. You failed. Staff Sergeant Wallace is here, stronger than ever, a testament that honor defeats greed." Judge Frost set down the papers. "I sentence you to 8 years in state prison, no eligibility for parole for 5 years. You will also be required to pay full restitution of $45,000 to Theodore Wallace. When you are released, you will have a permanent no-contact order. You will never be permitted to see or speak to your grandfather again." She looked at Theodore sitting in the front row. "Staff Sergeant Wallace served this country with distinction. You dishonored that service. You dishonored your family, and you will spend the next 8 years reflecting on that choice." Court adjourned. Theodore would be 84 when Marcus got out, living at Liberty House, surrounded by Marine brothers and Hells Angels family, and a daughter who visited every month without fail. Marcus would have no access, no contact, no second chance. Justice had been served. But justice wasn't the ending. It was only the beginning. Within a week of sentencing, Theodore met with Priest and Garrett. "I want to do something," Theodore said. "I want to make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to other veterans." "What are you thinking?" Priest asked. "A program. Partnership between the Hells Angels and the VA. When a veteran is identified as at risk, the VA calls you, not for violence, for presence, for protection, for coordination. Theodore leaned forward. Call it Angel's Watch. Because someone needs to be watching out for veterans who fall through the cracks. Priest and Garrett exchanged looks. We're in, Garrett said. Over the next 6 months, Angel's Watch grew from idea to reality. Formal partnership with 8 VA hospitals across 4 states, Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Pennsylvania. Training program for ER nurses led by Eleanor. Protocol for identifying at-risk veterans. Direct hotline to Hell's Angels chapters. And Theodore became the face of it. Visited rescued veterans personally. Told his story at VFW halls and American Legion posts. Spoke at nursing conferences and social worker trainings. 14 veterans were rescued in the first 6 months. 8 removed from abusive situations. 6 relocated to Liberty House. All thriving. And every single one received a visit from Theodore. I survived, he'd tell them. You'll survive. You're not alone. On December 20th, 2025, exactly 1 year after his rescue, over 100 people. Marines from Theodore's Gulf War unit, Hell's Angels from 4 chapters, VA staff, social workers, Eleanor and Garrett and Priest, Evelyn, Randall, Bones and Wire and Doc and Theodore, standing at the microphone, wearing jeans and a Marine Corps polo, and over it, the Hell's Angels honorary vest, dog tags visible. He looked good, strong, healthy, purposeful. 1 year ago, Theodore began and I weighed 118 pounds. I was starving, invisible. My Marine brothers had mourned me while I was still alive. Today I weigh 156. I'm strong. I'm surrounded by family I never knew I had. He paused. People ask what saved me. Was it the 300 motorcycles, the evidence, the arrest number? What saved me was one person who refused to look away. He looked at Eleanor sitting in the front row. Eleanor Grimshaw, ER nurse. She saw the signs, made one phone call, started a chain reaction. And that's the lesson I want to share today. Theodore's voice filled the room. In Desert Storm, I learned that small actions have massive consequences. One soldier holding the line can change the outcome of a battle. One person speaking up can save a life. You don't need 300 motorcycles to save a life. You need one person who gives a damn, one neighbor who calls APS, one friend who asks hard questions, one stranger who says this is wrong and I'm doing something about it. He looked across the assembled crowd. I'm asking you, be that person, because there are Theodores everywhere. Veterans being abused, elderly being exploited, people suffering while the world walks past. Don't walk past, make the call, ask the question, refuse to look away. His hand went to his dog tags. In the Marines, we say leave no man behind. That doesn't end when you take off the uniform. It's a code for life. Be the person who refuses to leave someone behind. Theodore's voice rose. I'm Theodore Wallace, Staff Sergeant, United States Marine Corps, retired. Gulf War veteran. I survived Iraqi artillery. I survived my grandson. I'm still here, still fighting, still faithful, and I'm asking you to join the fight, not with fists, with awareness, with action, with compassion. Be the person who makes the call. He paused, let the words settle, because that call might save a life. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Veterans saluting, civilians crying, Hell's Angels standing in silent acknowledgement. Theodore stood at the microphone, shoulders back, head high, still a Marine, still a warrior, still here. Afterward, people lined up to shake his hand, to share their own stories, to promise they'd be more aware, more willing to intervene, more ready to make the call. Theodore stood for 2 hours, greeting each person, listening to each story, offering encouragement and contact information for Angel's Watch. Because this was his mission now, his purpose, the reason he'd survived. Not just to heal, but to help others heal. To turn his pain into protection for someone else. To make sure no veteran ever felt as invisible as he'd felt. That night, Theodore returned to Liberty House, walked to his room on the 2nd floor, unlocked his door, stepped inside, Marine Corps photos on the wall, Margaret's picture on the nightstand, dress uniform in the closet, Hell's Angels vest on the chair, and on the small desk by the window, a stack of letters. Theodore sat down, picked up a pen, began writing. Dear brother, I know you feel invisible. I know you feel forgotten. I know you think nobody cares. You're wrong. I survived what you're surviving. And I'm here to tell you you're not alone. You're not forgotten. You matter. The same courage that got you through war will get you through this. Because Marines don't quit. Ever. If you need help, call Angel's Watch. We're standing by, ready to fight for you. Semper Fi Staff Sergeant Theodore Wallace, USMC RT. He sealed the envelope. Placed it on the outgoing mail stack. The seventh letter this week, to 7 different veterans, all referred through Angel's Watch, all struggling, all needing someone to tell them they weren't alone. Theodore stood, walked to the window, looked out at the parking lot below. 2 motorcycles sat there, brothers on Angel's Watch rotation, checking on Liberty House residents, making sure everyone was safe, always watching, always ready, always faithful. Theodore touched his dog tags, felt the weight of them, the meaning. He'd survived Iraqi artillery, survived loss, survived abuse, survived being erased, and he'd turned survival into purpose. Because the cycle continued. Saved becomes savior. Invisible becomes voice. Victim becomes warrior. Semper Fi wasn't just what he'd survived. It was what he lived. Always faithful, always fighting, always here. For every veteran who needed someone to refuse to look away. For every person who felt invisible. For everyone who needed to know that one phone call could change everything. Theodore Wallace stood at his window. Staff Sergeant, United States Marine Corps, Gulf War veteran, 78 years old, still serving, still protecting, still completing the mission, because Marines never quit, and Theodore Wallace was still a Marine.